Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking the anime series Dagashi Kashi. And it's been quite a while since I did a review of anything anime related. And now I've liked anime for quite a long time. It's just in recent years, uh, it's been harder to find something that really kind of has that special spark that really kind of gets me to say, okay, I'm willing to sit down and watch an entire season of this. But kind of lately, I've been talking with one of my friends from when I used to live in Japan, and talking about Japan and all this, and it sort of made me a little bit nostalgic for the place. I kind of found myself, missing hearing Japanese and listening to, and trying to speak it and read it and all that. So I kind of thought, well, maybe let's take another look and see if there's anything out there, in the current anime season that really catches my interest. And there were several shows that did genuinely look interesting, but nothing really made me kind of have that feeling like, okay, I'm willing to sit down and watch this. And I wanted something simple, something where I wasn't really going to have to make a huge investment. I guess is the best way that I can put it. And Dagashi Kashi really does sort of fit the bill there. It's a very simple slice of life kind of story. And it's also more or less a giant commercial for Japanese candy. Now, yeah, I'm gonna make try and if you're watching this, you're probably at least reasonably familiar with the show, but I'll give it to you in a nutshell anyway. The main character is this kid called Kokonotsu. His nickname because it is coconuts, because it does sound like the word coconuts. And his dad runs a candy store somewhere out in the boonies of Japan, and is very determined that his son take over the family business one day, while Kokonotsu wants to be a manga artist. Then one day, this girl named Hotaru, who's the daughter of a big candy company president, says like pops up at the store and says like, "Hey, we want your dad to work for us because he's a genius when it comes to candy." Dad says, "Sure, I'll do that as long as you can convince my son to take over the family business." And there we kind of have the basic premise. And unsurprisingly, Hotaru is this sort of, as people put it, attractive girl who kind of dresses in this sort of like light gothic Lolita look. Um, and she's a very excellent example of that trope of the manic pixie dream girl from TV tropes. And while she's certainly a likable character, she's also kind of that whole thing there is kind of one of the biggest problems of the show is that Hotaru as a character has no real nothing outside of her basically two things. She loves candy and knows a lot about it and rambles on about it, and hanging out with Kokonotsu. That's it. There is really nothing in her life beyond those two things. So while she's enjoyable as a character, she's also extremely flat as a character. And I do have to say, the characters on the show, while not bad, are sketched a little thin. Kokonotsu, he kind of has that thing. He wants to be a manga artist, he knows a lot about candy, and he likes hanging out with his two friends, these two twins, brother and sister, named To and Saya. Saya kind of has a bit of a thing for him. I mean, it's, again, very simple, but it's really enjoyable. In fact, I actually find Saya and To to be the more interesting characters in a funny sort of way, just because they're not constantly yammering on about candy most of the time. And that is kind of the other big flaw of this series is, at the end of the day, this is basically a giant commercial for Japanese candy. Now, and that's basically kind of like Dagashi's like roughly translates like cheap candy is kind of a simple way to put it. So you'll have these little sort of slice of life moments, and then someone, usually Hotaru, will start babbling on about candy. And well, you can definitely learn a little bit about Japanese candy if you really want to. It still comes across like a gigantic commercial because these are actual brands of Japanese candy. Now, I never really paid very much attention to candy when I was living in Japan because while I like candy as much as the next person, it's not something I ate terribly often. And while they do have some pretty cool and tasty stuff over in Japan, there's also a lot of stuff it's like, whoa, why in the name of God would you want to eat this? So, yeah. I suppose one of the things that really does work for the show in its favor in terms for me is that of the time I spent living in Japan, 2 years of it was spent in a rural town in Kyushu. There's about 15,000 people. And this series is again set in a small Japanese town. But, I don't think I ever quite picked up exactly where they said it was or if they even specified. But it was hard for me not to look at this place and see more than a little bit of the town that I used to live in. It's sort of like when the character's sort of walking through the countryside, from going from somebody's house to somewhere else. It would remind me of, sometimes riding my bicycle and just kind of having those moments in the summertime where you sort of look out over the rice fields and it's all green, you know, quiet. And it's just like, a very, a peaceful and beautiful moment. I kind of live in a rural area here in the Midwest right now, and there are some moments, especially when I'm looking out over the fields here in summertime and seeing all that giant, like endless fields of corn and all this other stuff. It's hard not to be struck by the sort of the beauty of the countryside. Of course, the show does sort of leave out that in the countryside in Japan in the summer, it often reeks of fertilizer for like 3 or 4 months. Seriously. And of course, the downside of where I lived when I was living in rural Japan was that I was within spitting distance of the local community garden, which meant that the fertilizer smell was even worse. So yeah, basically the countryside, while beautiful, does have this tendency to stink to high heaven for 3 to 4 months out of the year. So yeah, but kind of going back to the show. Uh, as I said, it's a slice of life show, just sort of, mostly about, kind of people, ordinary teenagers, nothing really crazy or fantastic, just sort of living their life in a small town. And then you've got Hotaro who will come in and act all crazy and then yammer on about candy. And that's kind of how it goes every single episode. You have the little slice of life moment, you have a little characterization, you have some funny stuff, and then Hotaro starts babbling about candy. And while repetitiveness is not necessarily a bad thing, it does kind of wear thin after a while. It's sort of like if you notice how a lot of older TV shows will often follow an extremely strict formula about what happens. And this show kind of cases that too. It is in a lot of ways very formulaic. But that said, it's still very fun. The characters are likable, and if you're willing to just sort of deal with the fact that you are watching a giant candy commercial, it's kind of fun and even a little bit interesting. And they do make Hotaro's ramblings about candy interesting by sort of really embracing the fact that this is anime to sort of have talking Japanese candy do all these crazy and weird things. It's very much a very, very Japanese kind of show. And I definitely did get a little bit of a kick when Kotaro started going on about Gillico, which, if you're familiar, is probably best known here in the West for having a giant sign in Osaka with a guy running, kind of dressed like he's there for a marathon. Again, if you're kind of into Japanese culture, you've probably seen a picture of this place at least once. I've actually been there. It's actually a pretty cool area of Osaka, and actually Osaka in general is a really, really cool town. I liked it there quite a lot. Uh, but anyway, um, at the end of the day, is this a series I would recommend? Well, I'd recommend it, but not to everybody. This is, I think, either going to be a show, either you're going to really enjoy it, or it's not going to be your cup of tea. Again, if you're looking for something a little on the lighter side, something simple, slow paced, kind of slice of life, and you're interested in learning a little bit about Japanese food or Japanese candy, this is definitely there. That's probably about the only anime in town where you're going to learn a lot about Japanese candy. So, I have to leave that up to you whether or not this sounds like something that would appeal to you. But, if there's more of this, would I check it out? Yeah, I mean, it's a show that has its flaws, but, I certainly had a fun time watching it, and I looked forward to seeing the new episodes every week. And I freely admit a lot of it was just sort of those little moments where I could look at there and see something that reminded me of my life in the Japanese countryside. But that's okay too. Again, it's a show that's not going to be everybody's cup of tea, but if you're looking for something simple, slow paced, and a little bit offbeat, then Dagashi Kashi is a nice show to check out. And with that said, I'm going to call it here. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. And of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi. Also, please join me on Tumblr at Jedi Reviewer. Till next time, take care and have a good one.